All right. Hello again, friends. Welcome back. Today I've got an interesting story I want to tell, which could be fun because y'all get to play a part in the story. So, fasten your psychological seatbelts. Let's hit the road. So, this story came out of the dark, dusty recesses of my memory a couple weeks ago in the process of applying for this contract with an educational tourism company that's looking for someone to handle their Japan bound clientele. So, in the course of this process, there's an automated interview where I would log onto a system. Questions would pop up on the screen, and I'd answer the questions. And I'd be recorded, and ostensibly, a human being would eventually get involved in this process and actually watch and listen to my answers. Now, the questions were pretty vanilla, actually, but one of the questions, I should say, my answer to one of the questions actually made me think of something pretty interesting, and that's what I want to lay out for you today. So, I'm going to tell a story. And as I tell it, picture the scenario in your head. Picture the setting, what everything looks like. Picture the people, what are they doing, how are they interacting, what do they look like, everything, and all the detail you can imagine. Keep all that in mind. Now, the question, oh, and a question would come up. I'd have 15 seconds to think of an answer, and then 45 seconds to give my answer. So, for a guy like me, that's not enough time in either regard. But the question was, think of a time in your professional career where you were faced with a difficult situation. Tell us what the situation was, how you handled it, and what the outcome was. Okay. So, in that 15 seconds, the only thing I could think of was this incident that occurred when I was in graduate school and I was working for the university police department. Now, this was for a university in Washington, D.C., in a part of town not far from the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, all that stuff. So it's not a bad part of town, but still, it's in the city. The campus is not separated or fenced off from the city. The campus is right out in the city blocks. Now, on this particular evening, I was stationed for the night shift at the front desk of the lobby of this massive freshman dorm, like 400 or 500 freshmen living in this one building. And my job was basically to sit there and make sure nobody and nothing caught on fire. Now, the big building, big lobby, big glass doors, and big windows also on the lobby. So I could see out into the street, see everything out there, including the far sidewalk where this gentleman was standing. And I don't think he was homeless, but he wasn't very well dressed either. And I he wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there watching all the freshmen come and go, walking in and out of the building, watching everybody walk by with not a very friendly look on his face. But that was it. He was just standing there. But he was standing there for like 30 minutes. So eventually, word gets around the officers on duty that there's this guy standing out on the sidewalk staring down all the freshmen. So, three of my fellow officers come roaring up in a police cruiser, screech to a stop in front of the guy, jump out of the car. They got their chests puffed out, and one guy has his hand on his baton, and they go up to the guy and they start barking at him, saying stuff like, "Hey, why don't you get the hell out of here? What are you doing here? Get the F out of here." All this garbage, trying to intimidate the guy to go away. The guy wasn't having it, and I think he knew that this was public property. This was a public sidewalk. We didn't have jurisdiction technically on this sidewalk anyway, but he wasn't doing anything, and he basically knew that, and that was the end of the story. Uh, Eventually, my fellow officers came to understand that that was the end of the story. They jump back in the cruiser, squeal around the corner, and take off. A few minutes later, another fellow officer of mine comes along. He's on foot patrol. Officer Godwin. Godwin, cool name, huh? He comes up to me and says, "Kevin, what's going on? What's the situation?" I explain, and we decide to go out together, cross the street, and go talk to this guy. Now, I go up, I introduce myself, I say, "This is Officer Godwin. We see you've been standing out here for a while. Is everything okay? Is there a problem? Something we can do for you? What's going on?" And he seemed to be ready for a confrontation, or he had his answers ready anyway. And probably just like before, he said, "Hey, this is a public sidewalk. This is public property. I can stay in here all night if I want to. I'm not doing anything wrong." And my answer to that was, "You know what, sir? You're absolutely right. You can stand here all night long if you want. But why would you want to?" And I don't recall exactly what I said, but the basic idea that I was trying to convey was that there's nothing going on here. Just a bunch of freshmen who probably most of them have never lived in a city before. They're just walking in and out of a building. Nothing else is happening. And I don't know your story, sir, but maybe there's someplace else you could be. Maybe there's something else you could do that would be a better use of your valuable time. Something along those lines. But the upshot was he stuck out his hand, shook my hand, and he walked away. And that was the end of the situation. Now, you've got all this information in your head, I hope. I hope you have a picture of the scenario. But I had to explain all that in 45 seconds. So I had to leave out a whole lot of detail in the story. And later on, it occurred to me that one of the things I left out in that story was the race of everybody involved. And I know that the correct sentiment, the correct reply to that would be, well, race doesn't matter. Sure, it shouldn't. But, you know, think of the scenario that you created in your head. We all have a certain, operative framework that we work with to kind of picture the world as we expect it or as we're inclined to see it. So without some of the details, we're going to fill in those blanks on our own. Now, how you filled in those blanks, I mean, if you want to psychoanalyze yourself about that, go ahead, be my guest. But that's not what I'm thinking about. What I'm thinking about actually is, for example, if you pictured those three officers in the cruiser coming up to the guy, if you pictured them as, I don't know, white, three white guys, and the guy on the sidewalk is black. All right, you picture that in your head, and the scenario, there's a certain dynamic working. Now, change it, flip it around. If there are three black officers and a white guy on the sidewalk, picture that scenario, and do the players in that scenario, do each person's actions, and does the dynamic in that situation, does it change it all for you? Maybe yes, maybe no. Something to think about. Same with, me as a white guy going across the street talking to this guy. Does it matter in light of the scenario as it played out? Everyone's actions are the same. The only variable is the different races of people. So if that changes, does your evaluation or does your, I don't know, view of different people's actions change? And that's what I was wondering after my interview. I was wondering what the interviewer, the person who would eventually watch my video and listen to my answer, I was wondering what they might picture the scenario to be. And if I had mentioned the races of the people involved, would that be different from what they would envision? And in turn, would that change their impression of the scenario in general? Would that change, their judgment of how I handled the situation or how it turned out? I can't go back and change my answers, and if I could, I probably wouldn't anyway, because I want that person, and I think this is the upshot. I want that person to just see a situation and picture it however they will, because we all fill in those blanks, don't we? We all have to picture things, and we have that operative framework that brings us to certain scenarios in our head, certain details, certain images in our head of how we think things are or would be. But I want that interviewer, that person listening to my answer to whatever scenario they have in their head, I just want them to come to the conclusion that that's the way I handled it. I handled it well. And, what was not a difficult situation, but could have become, ugly depending on, if those three officers came back, it could have gotten worse. It could have gone downhill. As it was, it ended pretty boring, to be honest. But that's what I want the listener to come to the conclusion, that I handled it man to man, face to face, with mutual, simple respect. So we'll see how it turns out if they get back to me and if they offer me a contract with them to do some work with them this coming year. I hope so, because I love working in the tourism industry. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. That's it from me for now. Hope to be back soon with another good story that you can enjoy. Till then, enjoy your days. Make them good. We'll see you guys. Hey, all, it's me again. Guess I'm not quite done. You know, I admit I was really hesitant to make this video and throw it out there because I know that the subject matter can be a little bit touchy. Um, but I think it's important to consider our operative framework, to consider the ways that we process information, the ways we process situations, you know, not just in terms of race, but in all sorts of situations where we've got different people who have different ideas and come from different places. Um, you know, if this video and this story that did come up these last couple of weeks in that interview process, if this story and thinking about the players in this story and changing them around, if that serves to, help somebody, you know, get a sharper insight into their own, their own conceptual framework, self-reflection is never a bad thing. So if this video serves a purpose, that's great. I'm really happy about that. It's a beautiful world, but I look around and I see there's a lot of room for improvement. So something I'm going to work on myself, and it's something that I hope maybe we can all think about from time to time. It's a beautiful world out there. I love talking to you guys. We'll see you again soon.